The trouble with the global South, what the West gets wrong about the rest. I saw this article recently, and it occurred to me that there's this notion that there's a threat or that there's something wrong with the global South coming together, that there's something wrong with the global South becoming its own bloc, its own power. And not only is the West now just coming to an understanding or just beginning to grapple with the notion of the global South, they're just beginning to understand that there is this opposition that has formed as a result not of a hatred for the West, but as a result of how the West has dealt with countries and conflicts around the world. And the one part of this article that is oftentimes that when I see it, I'm just shocked by is the fact that they don't realize that the Ukraine-Russia war is becoming one of the greatest catalysts for division in the world. The greatest catalyst that is dividing the South, the global South, or what we call the global South, into its own bloc versus the North is the fact that they entered this war with the notion that they could do to Russia what they had done to other countries, and it did not work. And as a result, not only did it not work, but it drove Russia as a galvanizing force into the mainstream of the opposition to the Western. Russia tried to be neutral for the most part, but it drove them into this opposition stance, and with them on the side of China, Iran, and others, the strength began to reach a critical mass to where now the global South is defying the West in multiple ways. And I just want to give you 4 of the examples of how the global South, as a result of these new things that have happened on the world stage, i.e. the Russia-Ukraine conflict, is going to change the world that we live in permanently. The Russia-Ukraine war, they thought in the West that they could isolate Russia and that there was no country that would come to its aid. They believed that their technology was superior, their production capacity, their stockpiles were superior to that of Russia, and that if they could isolate Russia, they, together with Ukraine, could deal a blow to Russia that would weaken it and enable the West to expand NATO, as well as to really create a total hegemony for the United States in the global world and the global stage. But the reality is that didn't happen. The global South came to Russia's aid. It in the face of the threats of sanctions. And Yellen was right. Yellen tried to warn the administration that if you keep sanctioning, if you keep using these pressure tactics, if you keep abusing your position, what will ultimately happen is these tactics will lose their ability to be effective at punishing countries that won't go along with the United States, won't go along with the EU or NATO or the Davos crowd, as I call them, their view of the world. Arsenal of autocracy. You see the tinge of cynicism, the tinge of hatred that they have for those who oppose the Western hegemony. North Korea and Iran are arming Russia in Ukraine. One of the ways that they are expressing their displeasure at the West is by coming to Russia's aid. U.S. promises new sanctions. Well, we already know that Iran is one of the most sanctioned nations in the world. And not only that, but there was a deal, there was a treaty. But because of domestic political purposes, the United States exited the nuclear treaty with Iran and once again pushed it toward this alliance between Iran and Russia did not exist 10 years ago, 15 years ago, not in the way it does now, but by pushing Iran to the side and increasing sanctions and trying to alienate them. You know the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that's what you've done. They've created this situation where Iran and Russia are moving in lockstep. First, they were scared. Look at this. It says Iran sends Russia hundreds of ballistic missiles. The ballistic missile program in Iran is one of the unique programs in the world, just like North Korea. Because they are under such heavy sanctions, how can more sanctions stop their creation of ballistic missiles? It won't. These countries have found ways, because they have been under sanctions for so long, because they have been under embargoes and pressure tactics and the seizing of their assets and their property for so long, that they have found ways to circumvent the Western sanctions. And as this emergence of the global South increases, they will find ways not only to create new weapons, ways to enhance their aerospace industries and to improve their economies, but they will become more defiant, more belligerent at the table. Regardless of what the dispute is, they will find that the opposition will be the same, that those who are against the Western hegemony will find themselves united, regardless of what their political, religious, whatever their backgrounds are. It will be an allegiance of necessity. And that's what happened in Ukraine. Iran and Russia enter a new level of military cooperation. We remember the Shahed drones, how they emerged onto the world stage, while the United States and its allies spent so much time talking about how Iran was a diminished government, a diminished state. All of a sudden, it was Iran that became the central player in the Ukraine war, not by giving boatloads of military equipment, but by strategically providing equipment and technology to Russia during a time where Russia was really on the back foot in the war. United against America, Russia, Iran, military cooperation is a looming threat. Well, I did a video about the strategic victory that Russia had achieved during this conflict. And the reality is this: the strategic victory was one that could have been avoided. It was a strategic blunder, really, by the West, by pushing Iran to the side, by alienating Russia in the way that it did in Ukraine and all along the Russian border, expanding NATO without any concern for Russian objections and Russian desires for security and self-defense. They created this alliance. This was not a natural alliance. This is something that they created out of their own actions. North Korea sent Russia millions of munitions in exchange for food. Yes, North Korea has some economic issues, and one of the ways that the West has sought to control North Korea is by pressuring North Korea in areas of food and fertilizer and technology and just trying to sanction and isolate the economy. Well, by doing the same with Russia, essentially you've pushed North Korea and Russia closer together. And in a time of need, what Russia needed was munitions, and what North Korea needed was greater economic trade. And one thing that North Korea had, because of the Korean War and because of their constant friction with the demilitarized zone and their constant friction with the United States, one thing that North Korea had plenty of is munitions. Conventional munitions, the type that Russia needed in order to fuel its campaign in Ukraine. And by the West not seeking to engage in a way that was constructive with North Korea, it essentially once again created a partnership between Russia and Iran. U.S. sanctions firms in China. And now this is, we talk about strategic blunders. I think the West is making the greatest strategic blunder in history by trying to alienate China, by building military bases and not taking into concern their strategic defense while trying to jeopardize the quality of life and their own advancement through sanctions and all of these export bans, by trying to manipulate the political order and the economic order and structures to create a false equivalency between the manufacturing capacity in the West and China. China is blowing the West away in manufacturing. And the only thing that the West is doing, instead of trying to compete, they're trying to restructure the global economy to create a situation of holding back China. And China will not be held back. They're not going to allow the West to cheat on the global stage and get away with it. Sanctioning the UAE is amazing to me, because the UAE has been one of the partners of the United States in many of its adventurous activities in the Middle East. And once again, you see that they're creating enemies, and the enemies are coalescing. This China-Russia pact has been one that has been around, but it has taken on new meaning with the emergence of the Russia-Ukraine war. They thought tactically that this would be such a great idea to isolate Russia. This would be a great idea to punish Russia. If we could just get into a conflict, a proxy war with them, we could punish anyone that would help them, and they would fall in line, because they did it before. They did it in Syria. They did it in Libya. They've done it in Iraq. They've done this over and over again, but the playbook stopped working. China is giving Russia significant support to expand weapons manufacturing as Ukraine war continues, U.S. officials say. China is the backbone, the dual use capacity. And one of the commenters, and I do go back and read the comments that are put in the comment section, one of the commenters said that Russia has its own military production capacity and doesn't need China. In this instance, I agree, but I disagree. Russia does have its own military capacity. It does have its own Soviet era industrial ability to produce weapons and conventional weapons on the battlefield. However, when it comes to some of the high-tech weapons that are out there, while Russia can produce them, China can produce some of the components at a much cheaper price. And if Russia is going to keep pace on the battlefield, and keep their economy in line, they need to acquire the parts and the necessary inputs at the lowest possible cost. And that's where China comes in with this manufacturing capacity to aid in this effort. By providing dual-use technology, dual-use equipment, it is helping Russia to not only keep pace, but to replace battlefield losses. The reality is this. Here's the kicker. Here's the reason that the West is so angry at the global South right now. It's because they see the issue in Ukraine collapsing. And they look down the road and say, if it fails in Ukraine, then our ability to move in, to topple governments, and to prop up military regimes to use as proxies against those who will not go along with our economic. And this is all economic. This all comes back to the West trying to expand their economic grip on the global economy. Ukrainian soldiers, here's what's happening, and they're seeing this. That's why they're panicking. Ukrainian soldiers say rear defensive lines barely exist amid Russian advance. Essentially what they're seeing is that the battle is not going well for them. The battle is deteriorating. Their credibility of the West is deteriorating. The military capacity of the European partners has not emerged as capable of going toe-to-toe with the global South. And the United States is caught up in too many military conflicts and is stretched too thin, as well as its political class is divided about the viability of this whole endeavor. And so you see this wrangling back and forth. And this is shown. And it's, I think it will be a trickle now, but a tidal wave later of countries moving towards the global South as a result of what they're seeing in Ukraine. This realignment, which is the second thing I want to talk about. There is a global realignment taking place. Not only are there countries defying the West by providing arms and equipment to Russia and not alienating Russia politically, but there's a global movement of those countries who make up the global South to come together economically and militarily. Let's look at the first part, economically. Will BRICS expansion finally end Western economic and geopolitical dominance? This is the question that the West should have been asking years ago while they were using their might, their clout, using the dollar, using their privileged position to gain an unfair advantage in trade against those countries in the global south, allowing their militaries or using their military to achieve economic advantage. And I did a video not too long ago about how the use of the United States military and the use of the Western military has not really been used in many instances for defense, but used as a mercenary force for the corporations, the global corporations, the multinational corporations, to expand their economic capacity around the world, seizing resources, toppling governments, doing unfair trade deals at the barrel of a gun. The world has seen this, and now they're coalescing. BRICS expands footprint in the global south. It's not just that BRICS exist, but it's the fact that BRICS exist and is expanding. One of the interesting things about BRICS versus BRICS Plus is the expansion of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But when you add the BRICS Plus groups and you continue to expand, what you see, this BRICS Plus is this purple line. And what you see is that this purple line has passed the G7 in its purchasing power. It's when you compare GDP using purchasing power parity, what you see is that BRICS Plus, as BRICS expands, their ability to foster economic trade becomes greater than the G7. It becomes greater when you look at not the nominal amount compared to dollars, but the amount that is adjusted for the differences in currency and the differences in inflation in each of these particular countries. BRICS Plus becomes very powerful in its ability to develop its ability. And when you look at growth in GDP, BRICS Plus is blowing the West away, because some of the fastest growing economies in the world are in the developing world. When you look at India, when you look at China, when you look at all throughout Africa, while the economies may be small now, their growth rate is astronomical in comparison to the growth rate of the European and the Western countries. And the fact of the matter is, it's not just that they have this advantage in purchasing power parity at this point, but it's the fact that more countries are seeking to join BRICS. They're clamoring to join. They see the fact that they need an alternative to the Western system of hegemony, the Western system of military intervention to achieve economic goals that negotiation and the use of the rules-based order no longer will achieve. Look at this. Iran, Russia, and China show off their ships in a joint naval drill in the Gulf of Oman. Not only are we seeing the formation of an economic bloc amongst the global south with BRICS as its center, but we are also seeing the formation of a military bloc amongst the global south with China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea at the center of that bloc. China, Russia, North Korea. Solidarity poses risk to the U.S. and its allies. And if there had only been, I did a video not too long ago about the strategic failure of the West. If they had thought strategically versus tactically, they would have looked down the road and decided that perhaps punishing China, perhaps trying to isolate China, perhaps trying to isolate North Korea, perhaps trying to isolate Russia would only create a situation where they are creating opposition to themselves. They are creating their own, sometimes your fears lead to you taking actions that inevitably bring your fears to life. And that's what we've seen with all of these tactics by the U.S. and the West against countries. It's brought the fear that they had of losing dominance. It's made their fear reality. De-dollarization. Let's talk about it. This is another way that BRICS, this is another way the global south is defying the West. BRICS countries could swing an economic wrecking ball at dollar dominance, even without a shared trade currency, former White House economist says. So the coming together and the expanding of BRICS expands not just their GDP and their purchasing power parity, but it expands their control over the natural resources of the globe. And if you don't believe that this is a threat, one of the commenters said that this wasn't a threat to the global, to the dollar, the emergence of a BRICS currency or BRICS trying to de-dollarize. Well, if you don't believe it, then why is the administration or the former administration already, and quite possibly the likely future administration, already creating in their minds penalties, discussing possible penalties for nations that move away from the dollar? BRICS nations lead global debate over reducing dollar exposure. Trump says Biden policies undermining respect for U.S. currency. The countries in the world don't have to use the dollar. First off, this statement shows a type of callousness, a type of, tone deafness in thinking that the dollar, there were other global reserves currencies. Britain had the global reserve currency. The Romans had the global, no global reserve currency lasts forever. And to think that you can punish countries just because they choose to use their own currency, to me, it's only, once again, it's tactical, not strategic. Just like when Trump pulled out of the nuclear arms arrangement with Iran, it was a tactical and political decision, but we see it now as an epic strategic failure in that it made Iran stronger, just like the Iraq War. The Iraq War didn't make Iran weaker. In the end, it pushed Iraq closer to Iran and further from the United States. These tactical maneuvers are turning out long-term to be strategic failures. Let's look at this article a little bit. Tariffs, export controls, and currency manipulation charges are among some ideas discussed by advisors to the former president, sources told Bloomberg. These measures would target countries, listen to this, this is astonishing, would target countries that take part in bilateral trades not based in dollars. So in essence, what they're saying is if two countries come together and decide to trade with one another, they come together and they decide that it's in their interest to exchange goods and services, and they want to use their local currency, or perhaps they want to do a direct barter for you provide this, we'll provide that. The United States is going to come in and begin to provide tariffs and sanctions against those countries because they decided to engage in trade with one another. You wonder why there's a defiance against the Western hegemony? It's because they talk about a global rules-based order, but it's all talk when it doesn't give them control over other countries and natural resources. They flaunt the capitalism speech that they give around the world. They throw that out the window, and they come back with a measure of corruption that you couldn't dream this up. You could not dream this up, that the United States would sanction a country because that country did trade with another country and didn't choose to use. Once again, this is economics at the barrel of a gun. This is monopoly, where everyone has to bow down to one player, and that the other players, one player gets to roll the dice 5 times on each turn, and the other players only get to roll the dice once. And then the player that wins says, it's because I'm exceptional. Is it because you're exceptional, or is it because you're manipulating and cheating the game? Fears of a de-dollarization backlash first emerged after the West slashed Russian access to the greenback in 2022. Once again, a tactical decision that the Biden administration was warned against, but they still did it. And then after they did it, they say, this is what everyone was warning us about, in retribution for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. For the many countries exposed to the dollar, that prompted calls to become less dependent on the U.S. currency as a mainstay of international trade and central bank reserves. Once again, You see it over and over again. We do something knee jerk in the West, do something out of anger or frustration, do something, and then come back later on when the dust settles and realize, oh my, this is a disaster. That's what's happened. Lavrov says Russia, China almost de-dollarized their trade. Essentially what they're saying is the trade that is existing bilateral between Russia and China no longer has to be converted into US dollar. And if Russia and China can do it, guess what? That's a sign that it can be done all over the global south. There are headwinds coming for the dollar in the global economy. BRICS prepares to launch currency in 2024. And oftentimes when we talk about BRICS currency, it's not that they're going to distribute a euro. Like in Europe, they're creating the mechanism to use local currencies as the base for their trade. They're creating the mechanisms to use the currency in its local denomination and to use the BRICS pay system for bilateral trade across different boundaries, different country boundaries. And that's important because it helps the local countries maintain autonomy over their economy, but it also gives them the opportunity to leverage the power of their central bank and to avoid the transaction fees and charges associated with exchanging into the dollar or the euro or the African franc or any of these other currencies that are heavily manipulated by the West. And it limits the ability of sanctions from impacting their country. BRICS de-dollarization efforts shifting the global economy towards gold. One of the key components of de-dollarization that people often don't talk about is that currencies up until, a lot of times the Nixon administration in the United States, but other administrations across the world were attached to some store of value so that the dollar, for example, reflected a percentage of gold. The currencies had some real value associated or underpinning them that you could turn them in and could exchange them for something that like gold or silver. Well, when they decoupled gold from the dollar, essentially you had fiat currency. It's important because we say it's important. And it exchanges for nothing besides the goods and services for those who believe in the country of origin. And one of the real strengths of Africa and other parts of the globe is that they do have natural resources. And when they begin to back their currencies by gold, when they begin to use natural resources and precious metals as an underpin for their currency and their trade, that not only will it stabilize the economy, but it will create a foundation for fair exchange of goods and services. One of the main problems that African nations have complained about is that there is not a fair exchange for their goods and services, that they are giving out resources, and because of the manipulation of the currency, they're at a disadvantage in these exchanges, but they need dollars in order to pay IMF debts. And so they're constantly giving out more and more resources in order to acquire fewer and fewer dollars in order to pay more and more debt. It's a losing proposition. And if they can decouple from this Western system of exploitation, they believe that they can grow their economies and the quality of life of their citizens. The US dollar is so strong that China's central bank, among others, just keeps loading up on gold. It's not necessarily that the US dollar is so strong, but if we look at the charts, and there's so many charts out there, I'm not going to show them, that China has shifted from its dependence or its loading up on the dollar and its purchasing of US government debt towards other stores of value for its reserves. And so as this continues and as other countries continue to move away from the dollar, it's a way of defying the West and decoupling, but it's also a way of restoring balance in the economic system of trade. or in the global system of economic trade. And I want to go to the fourth thing. And some people may say that this is not an important aspect of the way in which the West is, or the South, global South is defying the West, but I think it is. I think it's an important way of how the global South is resisting. And it's on the culture wars. It's on the value proposition. The West believes that they have the ability to dictate to the world what values, even though those values oftentimes, you talk about free press. But when you see Western countries get into conflicts, the first thing they do is shut down the media. You talk about democracy, but you look across the West and see all of the anti-democratic things, the gerrymandering, the rigging of elections, the uniparty systems, the forcing out of opposition parties. The UK and the United States are notorious for forcing opposition parties out and creating a space just for a uniparty system where, when it comes down to major issues, they debate over trivial matters, but when it comes to major issues, they're in lockstep. They talk about these things, but around the world, but they don't practice them at home. And the people of the world say we don't want you to tell us what religion to believe. People in the global South, they have their own religion, whether they're Hindu, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Christian, and they want to practice their version of their religion in the way that they see fit and make laws just as the West makes all of its laws based upon its morality and values to enforce that within society. These countries believe they have the right to do the same without Western intervention. And there's no issue that is more glaring of intervention on the basis of, Western values that is rejected more in Africa and throughout the world than this issue of LGBTQ. U.S. ratchets up economic pressure. Now we're going to sanction the country of Uganda because they have decided that there are certain behaviors, certain things based on their religion and culture that they don't want. Now, is this really a free market economy? Is this really what capitalism is about? Is this really what people think of when they think of a rules-based order? So when people hear a rules-based order, some who are naive think, oh, this is about fairness around the world. No, when people in the global South hear it, they think of it as corruption. The term rules-based order is a term that engenders Western corruption, intervention, and manipulation within the minds of everyone in the global South. And those who are informed hear it. Why would you use economic pressure, not negotiation, but use economic pressure to get a country to abandon its religion? Uganda accuses U.S. of pushing LGBT agenda after new round of sanctions. Are sanctions designed to attack religion? And who is the United States to tell another country what religion to believe and what religious principles they want to enshrine in law? When you hear Uganda, they talk about it. When you hear them talk about it, it's on the basis of culture. It's on the basis of religion. And who are the West to tell another country what culture, how they should dress, how they should worship God, if they should worship God, and what laws that they should enshrine in their legal system as a result of their values? It's it reminds me of a colonial mindset, an imperial mindset, where you are not autonomous. You do not have autonomy over your country. You do not have autonomy over your beliefs, your values. We will dictate to you, and either you will follow or we will bring down wrath on you. We will prop up dictators. We will funnel weapons. We talk about all these coups in Africa, but many of the times the coup leaders and the opposition forces are being funded and being equipped militarily by forces outside of the country. Because many times these countries were not producers of these weapons. They were consumers and users. The government was, And then all of a sudden they turned around and they see an opposition group with tanks and armored vehicles. Where did they come from? It came from outside. We talk about destabilization in Africa. It came from outside because there were the colonial powers that believed that they could control, that they owned not only the land, but the people, and that they had no right. They were property slaves of the West. And you see this continuing here, where they're trying to tell people in Africa what God to believe and how to worship that God. But look at the chart. Look at all the countries that have rejected Western values in this area and are standing true and standing strong. And you wonder why they're defying, because they're saying, hey, there's a line in the sand. We cannot allow them to eliminate our value system. And it's not just the Biden administration. I hear a lot of times people say, oh, this is the Biden administration pushing this throughout the globe and around the world. It's not just the Biden administration. The Trump administration launches global effort to end criminalization of homosexuality. It's okay to do it in countries that are for it. And it's okay to do it. And I'm not against the effort to end criminalization. What I'm against is the effort to use economic and military force to determine what other countries do when it's on the basis of their religion, on the basis of their values, and on the basis of their system. And what it does is it alienates further these countries and drive, once again, it's a tactical maneuver, and ultimately it creates a strategic failure. U.S. expresses concern after Burundi, another country. President says gay people should be stoned. Now, do I believe gay people should be stoned? No. Do I believe there should be the death penalty for homosexuality? No. Do I believe that the United States should have the right to dictate the religion of other countries and their laws? No, I do not. And what you see is around the world, the practices of the West are not in high demand and around the world. The cultural values, and a lot of us will argue that the West, with its high divorce rates, with its high children without parents, and its child poverty, with its pensioner poverty, with its homelessness and veteran poverty, the West is not in a position to lecture the world about social and moral values. With its racism and with its exploitation of rural populations, the way the West treats the rural populations, just in the United States, how we treat the people in the Appalachia and how we treat those who are poor. And I'm not talking about poor African Americans. I'm talking about poor whites and poor Hispanics. How can we go around the world in the West and dictate to others their moral and religious beliefs? And when you look at it, the global South is a much more conservative of the world populations, is where the most conservative individuals live. They are conservative countries, they're conservative religiously, they're conservative morally, and as a result, the West coming on the scene and trying to dictate to them what their religion should be is amazing. It's amazing to me that could be the mode at which the West operates. And so we see this over and over again. U.S. support for gay rights in Africa may have done more harm than good. It's not U.S. support of gay rights in Africa that's the issue. It's U.S. sanctions against countries. It's U.S. using pressure tactics against these countries is the issue. That's the primary problem with what's going on, is the pressure tactics and the sanctions that the United States has used in order to get its way in these countries. And that's the problem that they're resisting, and why they're defying and coalescing around a different global power structure than the one that exists in the West. I want to thank you for watching the broadcast today. I apologize to you. We had some trouble with the earlier broadcast. We had to stop and then come back because we had some drop frames and some other issues, and we seem to have solved them or mitigated some of that with this broadcast. And I just want to appreciate you, show my appreciation, and thank you for watching. I know there's anything you could be doing, many things you could be doing on a Friday. but you chose to watch this broadcast. And if you made it this far in the broadcast, you're one of our key viewers, and we want to and I want to personally say thank you for the time you shared with us this morning. Also want to ask if you would like the channel, follow us, share our content so that we could grow the platform, so that we could continue the discussion and bring more people to the table. Please leave a comment. If you leave one, I'll try to respond to it in the upcoming videos, as I did throughout the broadcast today. And as always, why swim against the current when you can ride the wave? Don't play the victim, play the game.
The world throws a lot our way financially these days. From war and conflict shaping global markets to local news headlines impacting your grocery bill, it can feel like no escaping the constant financial juggling act. But here's the secret weapon you might not know you have: knowledge. With the right understanding of how these complex economic forces work, you can navigate the uncertainties and make informed decisions that benefit your wallet. Unlock your financial power. Like this video to stay in the loop about the latest financial insights. Follow our channel for even deeper dives into money matters. Share this program with someone who could benefit from building their financial future. Remember, knowledge is power. While the US has been increasing its arms exports, Russia has been ramping up its industrial production. What could this mean? Over the past couple of years, Russia has significantly increased its industrial production, a move that surpassed the expectations of Western defense planners. The country's total defense spending has rocketed to an estimated 7.5% of its GDP. The supply chains have been meticulously redesigned to safeguard key inputs and sidestep sanctions. This massive industrial revolution has not been limited to the redesign of supply chains alone. Factories across Russia, producing ammunition, vehicles, and equipment, are operating round the clock. Often these factories are running on mandatory 12-hour shifts with double overtime. This relentless pace is designed to fuel the Russian war machine for the foreseeable future. As part of this transformation, Russia has been churning out military hardware at an alarming rate. Missiles, drones, combat vehicles, and artillery have seen their production rates skyrocket. This is in line with President Vladimir Putin's directive to ramp up production to ensure the success of the ongoing military operations. The implications of this increased industrial activity are far-reaching. This massive ramping up of industrial production has positioned defense at the heart of Russia's economy. It has resulted in a major shift in the economic landscape of the country. Defense has not just become a crucial part of Russia's economy, it has also become a significant employer. Putin recently stated that over 500,000 new jobs have been created in the military-industrial complex. This sector now employs an estimated 3.5 million Russians, making up 2.5% of the total population. The impacts of this shift are visible in the everyday lives of Russian citizens. Machinists and welders in factories producing war equipment are now earning more than many white-collar managers and lawyers. This is a clear indication of the redistribution of wealth that the increased focus on defense has brought about. This transformation has placed defense at the center of Russia's economy, creating a shift in its economic landscape. So, what has this shift towards defense-focused production meant for Russia's economy and workforce? The impact has been profound. Russia's military-industrial complex has seen a major growth spurt, with a staggering 500,000 new jobs created in the sector. This brings the total workforce involved in the defense industry to an estimated 3.5 million Russians. That's about 2.5% of the entire population of Russia. But it's not just about the number of jobs. This shift has also led to significant changes in the wage structure. Machinists and welders, the backbone of this defense production, are earning more than they ever have. In fact, they're now out-earning many white-collar managers and lawyers. This is a dramatic turnaround, and it's all due to the increased demand for war equipment. The production lines are running around the clock, with workers often pulling mandatory 12-hour shifts, supplemented with double overtime. This industrial revolution has put defense at the center of Russia's economy. it has reshaped supply chains, helped evade sanctions, and kept the factories humming with activity. But it's not just the factories that are benefiting. Vladimir Putin's recent visit to Uralvagonzavod, the country's largest producer of main battle tanks, highlighted the importance of training and education in this new era. The Russian leader promised funding to help train an additional 1,500 qualified employees for the plant. This points to a broader trend in Russia's labor market. As the defense industry grows, it's creating not just jobs, but career paths. It's offering opportunities for advancement and skill development, and it's attracting a new generation of workers. The defense-focused industrial shift has not only reshaped Russia's economy, but also its labor market. But how sustainable is this defense-focused industrial shift for Russia's economy and its war machinery? This is a question that has been on the minds of many. Just recently, President Putin visited Uralvagonzavod, the country's largest producer of main battle tanks. Here, workers proudly declared their commitment to round-the-clock production. Putin, in response, promised funding to train an additional 1,500 qualified employees for the plant. This move underscores Russia's determination to maintain and even increase its defense production capabilities. However, this relentless push towards militarization has not gone unnoticed. European war planners have expressed growing concern about Russia's ability to sustain a long-term war. As Russia's war in Ukraine enters its third year, the country's massive investment in the military is projected to be the largest as a share of GDP since the Soviet Union. Mark Risic, a deputy director in the policy planning department of Estonia's defense ministry, voiced this worry, saying, "We still haven't seen where is Russia's breaking point. Basically, 1/3 of their national budget is going on military production and on the war in Ukraine. But we don't know when it will actually impact on society. So it's a little bit challenging to say, when will this stop?" The question remains, how long can Russia sustain this level of military production and expenditure? How will it impact the nation's economy and its people in the long term? These are questions that do not have clear answers yet. Russia's aggressive ramping up of its defense industry has certainly given it an edge in the ongoing conflict. However, the long-term sustainability of such a defense-focused industrial shift is yet to be determined. It is a high-stakes gamble, with Russia's economy and the well-being of its citizens in the balance. The sustainability of Russia's war machinery, fueled by its defense-focused industrial shift, is a concern that has the world watching. What does the future hold for the global arms race and the sustainability of Russia's defense-focused economy? It's a question that's been echoing in the halls of power and in the minds of political analysts worldwide. In recent years, we've seen Russia significantly ramp up its production of military hardware to supply its army in Ukraine. This includes everything from missiles to drones, combat vehicles, and artillery. The intensity of this industrial shift is staggering. The production of some equipment has increased more than tenfold, a clear sign of Russia's commitment to its military operations. But this escalation isn't without its challenges. The West has responded with extensive sanctions on the Russian economy, which have added an extra layer of complexity to this arms race. These sanctions are not just symbolic gestures of disapproval. They have real, tangible impacts on Russia's ability to sustain its defense-focused industrial shift. They disrupt supply chains, increase costs, and create economic uncertainty. Yet despite these obstacles, Russia continues to press forward. It's a high-stakes gamble, one that is set against a backdrop of economic pressure and international scrutiny. It's a move that is reshaping Russia's economy, with defense now at its very core. What does this mean for the future? It's hard to say. The global arms race is a complex and dynamic phenomenon, influenced by a myriad of factors. It's a race that isn't just about military might, but also about economic resilience and geopolitical strategy. Some suggest that Russia's defense-focused economy may not be sustainable in the long run, especially in the face of ongoing Western sanctions. Others argue that Russia's increased military production signals a new era of prolonged conflict, one that could redefine the global balance of power. Regardless of the outcome, one thing is clear: the stakes are high and the implications are far-reaching. The future of the global arms race and Russia's defense-focused economy remains uncertain. As the world watches, only time will tell how these dynamics will change the face of global security. While the U.S.